Hello, and a very warm welcome to this session on developing your confidence as a supervisor, specifically your emotional intelligence skills. By the end of today's short session, we will have explored what emotional intelligence, which is also sometimes called emotional quotient, EQ, is, why it's important for supervisors to have these skills, and some practical skills to help you develop them, including a specific EI-related PDP item of your own. In a moment, I will ask you to pause the recording to consider these questions and take a closer look at the emotions wheel. We'll start with, how are you honestly feeling? Just in this moment. You can use the emotions wheel if that's helpful. Think about whether the feeling comes from a generalized mood or is it a specific emotion in response to a stimulus? And how might this be influencing your interactions and your decision making? Self-awareness is a key component of EI. Pause the recording now and record your answers and resume when you are ready. How many of us do you think are actually self-aware? If you had to guess a percentage. Tasha Eurich, in her book Insight, shares research that says only 10 to 15% of us are actually self-aware. That figure might surprise you. So let's consider why EI is so important for you as supervisors, but perhaps more widely, you as a leader and all the multiple roles you juggle. Peter Salovey did lots of work on this in the 1960s, but Goleman brought it to the fore in the 80s. He found that 67% of abilities necessary for superior performance in leaders were attributable to emotional intelligence factors rather than cognitive or technical abilities. What are sometimes thought of as soft skills are actually essential and core to what we do, and more is sought after by employers, and evidence that backs up it's better for organisations to have individuals with high EI. There are 4 areas of EI that we will explain in a bit more detail on the next slide. So let's start with the red circle, which is self-awareness, which we've already discussed, recognizing how you are feeling as it happens and knowing your usual reactions, strengths and weaknesses. The yellow is self-management or self-control, how you manage your emotions, handling feelings so they are appropriate. Next, in the green circles are social awareness, recognizing emotions in others and empathy and being able to read the room. And finally, the blue circles are relationship management or social skills, how you manage relationships, and this is dependent on the success of the first 3. If reading more on this topic, you will find that some models separate out a 5th element of motivation, intrinsic achievement or an orientation, because it can be about marshalling our own emotions to pursue a goal, stifling impulsivity and delayed gratification, but also about motivating others. So we're going to explore self-awareness and self-management in a bit more detail by considering the amygdala or limbic hijack. It can be stressful managing others who are struggling or when we are feeling stressed ourselves. Limbic hijack or amygdala hijack, or it has a variety of other names, fight or flight or the chimp paradox, which is a term no longer used, is a response to a perceived stressful stimulus. In Stone Age times, that might have been a liar or predator. But now we can be activated by more minor things in our current stressful worlds. An amygdala or limbic hijack refers to a situation where the amygdala, a part of the brain responsible for processing emotions often unconsciously, takes control of a person's actions and reactions before the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for rational thought and decision making, can engage. This leads to an intense emotional response that may be disproportionate to the actual stimulus. I wonder if you can recognize this in yourself or perhaps in others. So let's go back to that time when you experienced amygdala hijack and take a few minutes to think about these questions. You can pause the recording and write your answers down in the workbook. How did or do you know that you have been hijacked? Where might you notice it first? In your body in a specific pace? Who or what might trigger this response? 2. How do you tend to respond in the moment when you are feeling hijacked? And 3. What strategies do you have to manage this for yourself? Please pause the recording while you think and write these down and resume when you are ready to continue. These 4 self-management approaches for amygdala hijack come from an NHS Elect webinar I attended. Distracted feels fairly obvious. There's lots of evidence that practicing regular mindfulness can actually shrink the amygdala and enlarge the prefrontal cortex. Something as simple, however, as just a few deep breaths can help in the moment. Exercising it is obvious. You can actually physically move, you can write your thoughts down, you can vent and talk it out with someone else. Rewarding it, so really thinking about delayed gratification. For example, I look forward to an hour to myself or a short walk and some fresh air when this next task is done. And boxing it is an example of where we can kind of coach ourselves. So if you think about an athlete, they are essentially telling their limbic system to quieten down before a race. They are practiced in reminding themselves of the work they've already put in and that now it's all about the process, and actually all you can do is enjoy it in the end. They allay their own irrational fears and switch to a more realistic way of interpreting what the world is, what's happening around them. We can all do something similar and self-coach ourselves to step away from negative statements and think about how we find our own solutions in the moment. Also from that same NHS Elect webinar, a reminder of why it's important for supervisors and supervisees to be empathic at work. Can you consider which supervisors easily pick up the emotions of others in a room and who may storm ahead without noticing? Sigal Barsad talks about picking up the moods of others, these catching feelers. Empathy and social awareness can contribute to autonomy, connection, and competence for our supervisees. Language is always evolving, and some may prefer the term compassion rather than empathy at work. Here are some specific examples from others in each of the EI domains related to supervision. Have a look through these before you come up with your own PDP item related to EI. Here's your chance to formulate your own EI supervision related personal development plan to enable you to be more proactive about developing your confidence in incorporating EI into your supervision work. Focus on one area to begin with. Be clear and specific about how you will practice. Set a SMART goal. You may wish to enlist support from a friend. And consider how long you're doing this for. We suggest 3 to 6 months. And be kind to yourself as you plan to learn and review this. And just a gentle reminder that your EI supervision related personal development plan can be used in your next appraisal or your mandatory reflection in your PCN annual self-assessment form for supervisors. We think this is a really useful summary. This paper by Roth et al. Incorporates 12 tips for the introduction of emotional intelligence in medical education, but can of course be applied more widely to primary care and healthcare education too. We've used some of these strategies today and would invite you to look through and consider which of these you would like to try next in your education and supervision sessions. It could even be another PDP item. So here is a summary of what we've covered today related to emotional intelligence and supervision and what you have done. Before we leave you with our references and resources, here's 2 things we want you to think about before the end. What did you learn, or what do you want to revisit in more detail? And what will you do differently because of this learning? What's your next smallest step? Here are our references and some further reading if you are interested in this topic.